over towards eastern Scotland as well. Could be some damaging gusts of winds here. Stay tuned to the latest forecast. This weather front drives its way southwards. We'll see brighter and blustery conditions following in behind some wintry showers over higher ground and feeling quite cool with those strong and gusty winds, even though temperatures may get to 13 across the far south. That cloud and rain eventually clears the far southwest of Cornwall as we go through the early hours, and then clearer skies following on behind means that as those winds ease, we will see a touch of frost into Sunday. But the weather is set to turn yet more unsettled again on Sunday with another deep area of low pressure pushing in. Bye-bye for now.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing, your afternoon fix of all the latest political news, debate and analysis. I'm Arlene Foster and here's what's coming up over this next hour. As Number 10 braces for the Sue Gray report to be released, if it ever comes, we'll speak to a political commentator on the events of this week and preview what drama we can expect to come. Brexit chief Liz Truss was in Northern Ireland yesterday. We speak to GB News Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie and a senior DUP MP about the latest developments. And the SNP have been accused of a power grab, with ministers proposing that temporary coronavirus powers are made permanent. Give me your political briefing. Send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews.
Good afternoon, it's 1 minute past 3. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Met Police is asking Sue Gray to make minimal reference to the Downing Street events officers are now investigating. The findings of the civil servants report, yet to be published, could potentially trigger a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister. The force confirmed it isn't calling for any delays, but is in contact with the Cabinet Office to avoid any prejudice of its investigation. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the investigation is becoming a complete distraction.
Got a criminal investigation into the behaviour of the Prime Minister and what went on in Downing Street. There are bound to be process issues along the way, but this is caused by one thing, and that's the behaviour of the Prime Minister. And the net effect is that whilst people are struggling with their bills, he and his government are paralysed with these investigations and allegations of what they've been up to in breach of the rules.
The national insurance hike is going ahead, according to government ministers, despite reports the Prime Minister's considering its delay. Conservative MPs are among the voices calling for the increase in April to be dropped as families struggle because of a rise in the cost of living. The Russian president has told his French counterpart Moscow's main security concerns over Ukraine have not been addressed. Vladimir Putin held talks with Emmanuel Macron earlier, following the US and NATO's response to Russia's proposals, which include a request Ukraine will never be allowed to join NATO. That, as the Kremlin sent its strongest signal yet that it's willing to engage with the US and reiterated it doesn't want a war. Meanwhile, British companies are being warned to strengthen their digital defences following malicious online attacks in Ukraine. The National Cybersecurity Centre says the incidents bear the hallmarks of Russian activity. No current threats have been identified in the UK, but guidance has been updated to ensure businesses stay ahead of potential threats. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg warned that the West must be prepared for different forms of Russian aggression against Ukraine.
NATO allies provide significant support to Ukraine, both to bolster their cyber defences, to share information, and to share best practices. Be prepared for a wide range of different forms of aggressive actions by Russia against Ukraine.
A senior civil servant has apologised for misleading MPs over the evacuation of animals in Afghanistan. Sir Philip Barton told the Foreign Affairs Committee that the Prime Minister's special representative for Afghanistan, Nigel Casey, had not been told about the intervention. However, recent emails show Mr Casey did ask Number 10 for guidance on what they wanted to be done with the Nowzad animal charity. Meanwhile, the UK has pledged a further £97 million of emergency aid for Afghanistan. That's after the government promised to double financial support following the Taliban's takeover last summer. It brings the total to £286 million this financial year. The money's being used to buy food, water and sanitation facilities. Meanwhile, over in the US, a bridge has collapsed in the city of Pittsburgh, sending a number of vehicles, including a bus, into a ravine. It happened just hours before President Biden visited the city to press for his $1 trillion infrastructure bill, which includes bridge maintenance. Authorities say 10 people sustained minor injuries when the structure collapsed earlier this morning. An antiviral pill for those most at risk of serious COVID infection will be rolled out across the NHS next month. The government has announced the UK's second antiviral tablet, known as Paxlovid, will be made available to thousands of people with weakened immune systems from mid-February. Studies suggest the drug made by Pfizer can cut the risk of hospital admission or death by 88% if given in the first 5 days of symptoms. The government's pledging to officially recognise British Sign Language after a new bill had an unopposed second reading in the Commons. It's hoped the legislation will improve access for deaf people and promote signing during public announcements. Labour MP Rosie Cooper addressed the Commons earlier and spoke about the personal significance this bill has.
For every deaf person like my parents who've been ignored, misunderstood, or even treated as unintelligent for simply relying on BSL, this recognition will be clear and will be a message that their language is equal and should be treated as equal.
Labour MP Rosie Cooper speaking earlier. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens, but now back to the briefing with Arlene Foster.
And welcome to the show. The Met Police have told Sue Gray to keep key details out of her report into lockdown parties in Number 10, throwing the process into confusion. The Met says it does not want Ms Gray's report, which had been due to be published this week, to prejudice their investigation. Number 10 faces an anxious wait for the conclusions of the Gray report, with the PM vowing to fight on whatever the conclusions, and even if the 1922 committee reached the magic number of 54 letters, which would trigger a vote of no confidence in the Conservative Party. Well, joining me now to discuss this week's political dramas and to preview next week is political commentators Georgia Gilhooly and Bill Bowkett. So, Georgia, I'm going to start with you. And I think every Friday now I start my programme by saying we've had a really mad week this week, what you're taking it. So I'm not going to break with tradition. I'm going to say to you, what are your thoughts on this past week?
Yeah, so I think probably the one word I could use to summarise this week is actually waiting, because I feel like there's lots of things that feel like they're about to happen, but they've not actually dropped yet. So we're waiting for the Sue Gray report. We're waiting to see if Russia will invade Ukraine. We're waiting to see what the fallout will be with, the possibility that Boris Johnson may have lied about trying to bring in or evacuate the animals in Penfarthing from Kabul. We're also waiting to see, obviously, whether they will actually U-turn on national insurance, which, probably speaking in a self-serving way, I hope they do, so I don't have to pay more. But that's how I would characterise the week. So it's sort of like there's a lot going on, but we don't actually know where it will lead right now as it stands.
So yes, Bill, I think George is right in that, because in the middle of the week, was the Sue Gray report coming on Wednesday? Was it coming on Thursday? It didn't look as if it was coming this weekend. It has been an interminable wait for this report. And now, of course, where does this all leave Sue Gray's report, given what the Met has said today?
To be honest, I'm not really sure, because when the Metropolitan Police announced the investigation on Tuesday, they were going to launch an investigation into Partygate on Tuesday, there was worry that the Sue Gray report, the internal report, would be delayed. But then Downing Street insisted that it's still on schedule. But now that with today's announcement about, the Metropolitan Police calling for minimal references within this wider report, they're saying actually Number 10 shouldn't delay the report itself and that it should still go on schedule. But I'm worried that it is going to come, if it is next week, it's going to be so vague that we're not going to have a full picture as to what actually happened, in Westminster, in Downing Street, in Whitehall, all those months ago when we had all these reports of illicit parties. And I think now with Tory MPs, they're kind of being a bit hesitant at the moment as to launch an attack on Boris Johnson and his leadership by writing a letter to the 1922 committee. And it seems that they might do so after this police investigation has concluded, which can take months now.
Well, are they being hesitant? Because there's some rumours doing the rounds, and I do accept that there's quite a few rumours doing the rounds this week, that the pork pie plotters are back and that indeed they're working together now again to try and bring about a putsch. Are you hearing anything around all of that?
I do. I think I understand that in midweek, there were reports, at least, that some Tory MPs were becoming more confident that government unity was uniting more than it was, over the last month or so. But now with today's announcement by the Metropolitan Police, and there was I don't know if you saw, there was a tweet by Nadine Dorris where she posted a picture of herself eating a pork pie in sly reference to those Red Bull MPs that were plotting against Boris Johnson. It seems that, government disunity or disunity between the cabinet and the backbenchers has arisen once again. Because also you need to realise is that it's not just within the backbenchers, it's also within the front benches. I mean, Georgia mentioned this potential cut in national insurance, which isn't going to happen. And now you have Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, now referring to it as the Prime Minister's tax rather than of his tax, within the Treasury, to kind of distance himself from the Prime Minister, who is under immense pressure at this moment of time.
And undoubtedly, Georgia, there's a bit of briefing going on around the different camps that are emerging, because, of course, there's some briefing that Rishi Sunak doesn't want Article 16 invoked in relation to the Northern Ireland Protocol. And then, of course, we had the whole hullabaloo last evening about the fact that a government minister had used a government plane to do government business.
Yeah, I think in reference to Rishi Sunak, it's him and Boris Johnson do obviously have very different styles and very different personalities. But I do think it's just the classic, the Treasury want to focus on finances and the PM just wants to sort of keep himself in number 10. You referenced obviously the hurrah about Liz Truss using the government's private jet to go on business to Australia. I suppose the people who are complaining about the environmental impacts, I guess, from within their logic, I suppose it makes sense to complain about it. But in terms of the money, I mean, the government already invested in the private jet, and in the situation we're currently in with possible war with Russia, kind of hostilities on all fronts, it does make sense for the Foreign Secretary to travel in the most secure way possible, whether or not it sort of might look a bit too glamorous, for a British minister or not. I don't really think it's that much of a big deal.
If you consider that France has 5 jets apparently and Germany more,
France is more stylish than us, so
you may say that. I'm sure Liz Truss would obviously challenge that. But there's also been a development in the 1922 committee, Georgia, that there was some talk of, if there was an early confidence vote, that then another could happen within 12 months. But that has been ruled out now, hasn't it?
Yeah, of course. I think the idea was obviously to sort of tighten those kind of things up to make it, I guess, easier or more difficult, depending on how you look at it, to get rid of Boris Johnson. But I think it's still quite difficult to sort of figure out what will actually happen with him, because if this report is just delayed and delayed and delayed, it's going to hang over, it's going to constantly be in the headlines. But at the same time, there won't necessarily be a smoking gun, which will provide some of those more reluctant MPs with an excuse to try and get rid of him. And also, as we were saying, if you try and get rid of him once and then it fails, you've got to wait for a long time to try it again. And who even knows where we'll be in a week's time, never mind, a year's time.
Well, that's it, Bill. I mean, I think that some MPs will now be thinking, should they send their letter in now, or should they wait till after the next big event, which, if this report doesn't come out, surely will be the May election?
Yes, it's a big deliberation as to the perfect time to do it, because there were reports that letters were being filed in and around December, but then they thought, let's wait for the Sue Gray report to conclude. Now it might be the case it's waiting for the Metropolitan Police investigation, or Tory MPs might think that indeed the May elections might be the optimal moment to start filing letters to Sir Graham Brady. But I think what we're seeing right now actually has a lot of benefit to Boris Johnson, because while we're waiting for this inquiry to conclude, it essentially buys him time to meet Tory MPs, which is what he's been doing all week, particularly his loyalists and also the Red Wall rebels. But also it could give him a prime opportunity to change his inner circle if he wanted to, or now change his language to refer to the idea of changing the culture within Downing Street to, in his words, to get on with the job, with the people's priorities, to focus on, for instance, the cost of living crisis, the situation in Ukraine. Obviously, there's now another internal inquiry into Nisgani and Islamophobia. They would rather focus on that rather than let this whole Partygate scandal dawn over them.
Yeah, and just finally to both of you, if you don't mind answering, I'll go to Georgia first. I mean, what damage is this doing to the brand of the Conservative Party? Because they would much rather, as Bill has said, be focusing on cost of living issues, on the fact that there may or may not be aggression in Ukraine by Russia. What damage is this doing to the party? Very briefly, both of you.
Yeah, I think it's actually doing quite a lot of damage as it stands. Obviously, we don't really know if that will stick until the next election. It sort of depends how it's handled. I don't think it's being handled brilliantly right now for obvious reasons. And if you do look at the polls, for example, among even grassroots Conservative supporters, Boris Johnson is something like -33 as of the end of December or the beginning of January. I can't recall exactly. And also, if you look at actually some of the polls in the Red Wall constituencies that were released at the beginning of January, so before this even kicked off, it was looking pretty damaging to the Red Wall MPs.
Yeah. And Bill, what's your take in a couple of sentences?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with Georgia in the sense of declining support within the polls. Even Labour are still leading. I think the most recent YouGov poll, they were 4 points ahead. But also they're now failing behind on issues in which they've almost had a stronghold on, for instance, on levelling up, which they're now falling behind even the Labour Party. So I think that is becoming a real issue as well.
Well, Bill and Georgia, thank you so much for coming on to the briefing to give us an update on what has been going on this week. But coming up next, yes, it's that time of the week again, your Northern Ireland Brexit update. But before that, let's take a look at the weather.
Hello, we've got some lively weather as we head in towards this weekend. A change from drier weather to much windier and some wetter weather to come as well, although southern areas generally staying quieter. Now, high pressure hanging on towards the south, but it's this area of low pressure which has been named Storm Malik by the Danish Met Service due to some severe weather here. That's going to affect parts of Scotland through Saturday, and then yet another system starts pushing in on Sunday. But through this evening, it's largely dry, a lot of cloud around across many areas, and it's mild as well. But we will have some wet weather starting to push its way in across Scotland. The winds begin to pick up here by the end of the night. So into the start of Saturday, we could see some pretty wet and windy conditions across the West Highlands. But if anything, temperatures rising somewhat through the night with all that cloud around. So through the morning then, we've got this heavy rain from this cold front and some very gusty winds transferring from west across to the east through the day. We could see gusts of 70 to perhaps 80 miles an hour. These are damaging gusts for many places. The winds remain strong through the afternoon, but skies will clear. We'll see blustery showers feeding their way through. It does stay grey and misty across southern areas, but very mild here, feeling cooler where the winds are stronger through the rest of the country. Now, those stronger winds will continue for a time. Again, 80-mile-an-hour gusts for the Northern Isles for a time before they start to ease away. Then we've got a ridge of high pressure coming in on Saturday night, so that clears the skies. We will see quite a cold night to come with a touch of frost as we start Sunday morning. But already you can see the cloud beginning to thicken out towards the west. Temperatures 2s and 3s as we start Sunday morning. So a lovely, bright, sunny start to the day on Sunday for many of us. But across Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, those skies turning cloudier quite quickly. And this is the next system which is going to swing in as we go through the day on Sunday. That is going to bring another spell of very windy weather on Sunday night across the north, but even further south as well. I'll stay tuned for later. Bye-bye.
I'm Darren McCaffrey, and join me on the briefing Monday to Thursday at 3 p.m. You'll get your afternoon fix of all the latest political stories, debate and analysis, as well as interviews with some of the biggest names in UK politics.
It's a problem that affects the whole world, Darren.
From Westminster to Cardiff, Edinburgh and Belfast, if it's happening in UK politics, we've got it covered. That's the briefing with me, Darren McCaffrey, Monday to Thursday, 3 p.m. on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
My name name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Mark White, here on GB News. For more than 2 decades, I've been at the sharp end of reporting crime and security at home and abroad. From the scourge of terrorism to the fight against violent crime and the deepening small boats crisis in the Channel, they're issues you rightly care about, and so do I. As GB News Home and Security Editor, my focus will be on the stories that matter to you.
And welcome back to the briefing. So Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has said that she wants to strike a deal on the Brexit protocol that works for everyone in Northern Ireland. Ms Truss said that she hopes to make significant progress by February. The DUP has repeated its threat to withdraw from Stormont if the UK and EU do not reach a solution in the coming weeks. Government has been trying to renegotiate the Northern Ireland Protocol, a deal it made with the EU back in 2019, and with no significant progress made so far. Patience is wearing thin in Northern Ireland. Our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie, sent in this report, which starts with a question in the Commons on the protocol.
Prime Minister will know that many families across the United Kingdom are struggling with the increased cost of living and rising energy costs. But in Northern Ireland, that is compounded by the protocol. 27% is the increase in the cost of bringing goods from Great Britain to Northern Ireland when we can get access to those goods. It is costing business £2.5 million every day, almost £1 billion a year, the cost of the protocol.
Nation of the right honourable gentleman opposite, and yes, Mr. Speaker, I never thought when we negotiated that this would be 200 businesses have stopped supplying Northern Ireland. Foods are being blocked, Mr. Speaker. Christmas cards are being surcharged. And frankly, Mr. Speaker, the EU is implementing this in an insane and pettifogging way. And we need to sort it out, and I completely support what he's saying.
Words of a British Prime Minister commenting on his own oven-ready deal. This deal, in his words, was to get Brexit done. Instead, it left part of the UK in a worse position, falling between two markets and being stretched to its political limits, with no consent in unionist communities.
There is no consent for the protocol in Northern Ireland. That's why we've said that the Belfast Agreement has been undermined by the protocol, because there isn't a single unionist here at Stormont that supports it, and therefore the protocol doesn't have the required support. That undermines the Belfast Agreement. That's what's creating the instability here within those institutions.
Liz Truss was in Northern Ireland yesterday to talk to some parts of the community and sound out thoughts and to look for a way forward. Although she did acknowledge that the task would not be in any way a breeze.
Well done, Julia.
I'm not in this to do easy stuff.
No. Right, good answer.
It's true though.
See you later.
Yes.
See you later, yes.
As her convoy sped towards Stormont, it was clear that she has an idea of a deal and pointed to a joint committee on February 21st.
We were given an update in terms of the ongoing discussions between the EU side and the British government on making the protocol work. It was more of essentially a repeat of what's been said before, that they're continuing to talk. I very much welcome the fact there's going to be a joint committee meeting in February. Liz Truss repeated her words that there is a deal to be done, that she's working to find solutions. But again, that's yet to be seen in terms of actually striking an agreed way forward.
With Irish politics, it's never straightforward and very rarely agreed. With opposing sides in Brussels and Belfast, someone will lose political capital. And now it's time to decide who that will be. Dougie Beattie, GB News, Stormont.
And Dougie joins me now from Belfast. Dougie, you're very welcome to the show. Dougie, Was wondering what you felt the mood was in Northern Ireland after that visit from Liz Truss yesterday. Yet another high-profile visit from a government minister to show that they are listening to people in the community. What's the mood like?
The mood, I think, after yesterday's meeting was one of amazement. Liz Truss has come here as Foreign Secretary. People were thinking surely she already knew what Lord Frost had gathered on the ground. And in unionist communities, at least, it's very much thought, well, from the ground in the test that I'm taking, that Jeffrey Donaldson is being pulled along here towards an Assembly election. And he has to make up his mind very quickly. The NIO very much stage managed. It felt like that yesterday. It felt that Liz was being brought to community organisations, charitable organisations, places that wouldn't really have that much to say under their charter. And Jeffrey Donaldson finds himself in a very, very strange place.
It wouldn't be the first time there'd been some stage-managed visits by very significant figures. But I heard the Deputy First Minister there refer to the Joint Committee. And for our viewers, of course, the Joint Committee is a meeting that takes place at a very high level between the European Union and the United Kingdom Government. Northern Ireland First Minister and Deputy First Minister are allowed to attend that meeting. But it's an incredibly, as I have been on it, formulaic meeting, and in no way will bring about a solution to what's going on in Northern Ireland.
No, it won't. It is, again, a stage management of this. It's paying lip service to all of this. And it really does show that the only people that have anything in this game is London and Brussels. Dublin doesn't even have anything in this game. Ireland's being told how to behave and expected to take it. But I tried to ask Sinn Féin yesterday about did they acknowledge the worries of the unionist communities around consent and the lack of political representation, because if our laws are being made by Brussels in Europe with the European Courts of Justice sitting across any difference in laws between the United Kingdom and ourselves, well, we have no MEPs in Northern Ireland. So therefore, the only parties that have MEPs and representation there would be Sinn Féin and the SDLP, another nationalist party, through their sister party, Fianna Fáil. And when I tried to ask that question to Michelle O'Neill, their press officers, Sinn Féin's press officers, moved in very swiftly to shut that down. So, you know, it's hard to know how one side has any empathy or sympathy for the other side if they're not prepared to answer very simple questions of where they see the other side sitting.
Well, that's an interesting point, Doug, because I don't think a lot of people probably throughout the United Kingdom realise that Northern Ireland is still subject to rules and regulations made by the European Union, despite the fact that we have absolutely no representation in the European Union, because like the rest of the United Kingdom, we don't have MEPs anymore. However, that's the situation that we find ourselves in now. And thank you, Dougie, for joining me and updating me on the mood on the streets in Northern Ireland. I'm going to speak with a DUP MP on what is the next move for that party after the break. But we're going now to the news.
It's 3:30. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Met Police has asked Sue Gray to make minimal reference to the events it's investigating. Her inquiry into alleged Downing Street parties during lockdown was due to be released this week. The force isn't calling for any further delays, but confirmed it's in contact with the Cabinet Office to avoid any prejudice in the investigation. A senior civil servant has apologised for misleading MPs over the evacuation of animals in Afghanistan. Sir Philip Barton told the Foreign Affairs Committee that the Prime Minister's special representative for Afghanistan hadn't been told about the intervention. Recent emails, though, show Nigel Casey did ask Number 10 for guidance on what they wanted to be done with the Nowzad animal charity. NATO says we must be prepared for a wide range of aggressions against Ukraine, but added that doesn't necessarily mean a heavy military attack. That, as Russian President Vladimir Putin held talks with his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron earlier regarding security proposals over Ukraine. Over in the US, a bridge has collapsed in the city of Pittsburgh, sending a number of vehicles, including a bus, into a ravine. At least 10 people sustained minor injuries. It happened just hours before President Joe Biden visits the city to press for his $1 trillion infrastructure bill, which includes bridge maintenance. The government has announced the UK's second antiviral tablet, known as Paxlovid, will be made available to thousands of people with weakened immune systems from mid-February. Studies suggest the drug made by Pfizer can cut the risk of hospital admission or death by 88% if given in the first 5 days of symptoms. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. After the break, it's back to the briefing with Arlene Foster.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back to the show. Before the break, we were speaking about the Northern Ireland Protocol, and we hope to return to that story before the end of the show. But SNP ministers have been accused of a power grab in Scotland over plans to make some emergency coronavirus powers permanent. Critics said the proposals would allow the Scottish Government to shut down schools and confine people to their homes at the drop of a hat. The coronavirus bill would give ministers the ability to respond to public health emergencies in a similar way to legislation passed in the wake of COVID. This includes imposing lockdown restrictions, allowing court hearings to take place remotely, and restricting access to schools. Well, joining me now to discuss this is the Scottish Conservative MSP, Megan Gallagher. Megan, you're very welcome to the show. There's a couple of issues I wanted to touch on today, but let's start with that so-called power grab. I mean, this has been feared all along, hasn't it, that, you know, when governments get a piece of legislation by emergency power, that they'll want to keep those powers. What's your reaction to this?
Good afternoon, Arlene. And yes, it is a fear, particularly here in Scotland. I think everyone understands that during the pandemic there was a necessity to create emergency and temporary powers, but it is completely unacceptable for Scottish Government ministers to try and keep those on a permanent basis.
And it certainly flies in the face of accountability when you have a government in place with a majority, albeit with the Greens. Surely when you have that situation, you need to have that accountability in Parliament.
Absolutely. I don't think there's any excuse for the Scottish Government to bypass the scrutiny of opposition MSPs. And should this bill go through as planned, unfortunately, that will happen. And it means that we won't be able to scrutinise, particularly the power within the bill to close schools and to release prisoners early, which are of particular concern.
Oh, I can imagine. And whilst, of course, in the political classes there'll be much discussion about this, what's the reaction been with the general public, Megan?
Well, I've certainly received many emails from concerned members of the public. They want to know why these temporary powers will be made permanent, and they want to know why the Scottish Government was wanting to do this without the full scrutiny of Parliament. I think it's important that...
Sorry, I think I've got a frozen Megan there. We'll try and get her back. But certainly it is very concerning in Scotland that should be the case. Something I also want to discuss with Megan, if we can get her back on the line, is this survey that's currently being conducted by the Scottish Government, and it asks some very invasive questions about young people. Some of the questions that have been asked, actually, I would see them as illegal, asking about illegal acts, actually, and I'm just wanted to ask Megan the question, is this what progressive politics looks like in Scotland? And it is very concerning that has been the case. So I'm sorry that we've lost Megan there, because it would have been lovely to hear her take on all of that. But with 1 week to go until the Winter Olympics in Beijing, Team GB athletes are on their way to China. And among them are sisters Izzy and Zoe Atkin, who live in the United States but are representing Great Britain at the skiing events. Our reporter Ellie Costello spoke to them ahead of their flight to Beijing.
Sisters Izzy and Zoe Atkin have been skiing together since they were children. With a British father, they've now both been selected to represent Team GB at the Winter Olympics in Beijing. It hasn't been an easy run-up for Izzy, who, 7 weeks out from the Games, was involved in a skiing accident.
I just fell directly on my left hip, so broke my pelvis and have, not skied since then. It's definitely going to be very tight in terms of, fractures normally take 6 to 8 weeks to heal. And this Friday will be 6 weeks. So it'll definitely be pushing it, hitting jumps and rails, and that's Olympic slopestyle course.
And how much of your training has it kind of knocked out?
A lot.
All of
it. I was supposed to be, this whole January really just focusing on training and apart from doing the X Games, but that's still, So a lot of training time I've lost, which is definitely a bummer. I'm not going to be able to do, the run that I had planned. But even if I just get the chance, if I'm able to go at this point, I'll be really happy.
Izzy's younger sister Zoe is just 19, and this is her first Olympics.
I'm really excited because it's been such a big dream for so long, and watching my sister go to the Olympics and win a medal was really inspiring, and I'm really excited to have the opportunity to represent Team GB at the Olympics this year.
What would it mean to the two of you to get to go to an Olympics together as sisters?
It would be a dream come true. Obviously, when I was growing up, our sport wasn't in the Olympics, at least when I was very young and just getting into skiing. So I'd never really expected that it was something I could do. And then I obviously, when I went in Pyeongchang, it was such an amazing experience. It was so different from anything any competition I had ever competed in before. And so just to get to experience that and be there with my best friend, would just be incredible. Obviously, I know it's going to be this Olympics will definitely be a little different, the COVID restrictions that China has in place, but it would still be cool to just have someone that I love and trust and part of my family there with me.
So what are your hopes for Winter Olympics 2022?
It's been such a dream for so long that I'm really just excited to go, and I really just want to enjoy the experience and feel the vibe of the Olympics. But I also really would like to land a run especially with some new tricks that I've been working on. So it'll be a new run.
A medal? Do we not want to jinx that?
I mean, it would be nice, but I'd like to say that I want to land my run and then we'll see what happens after that.
Ellie Costello, GB News.
So 2 girls living the dream there. So it's really good to hear from them. But earlier we were discussing the Northern Ireland Protocol, and yesterday Foreign Secretary Liz Truss said the UK government would not intervene to prevent DUP ministers in Northern Ireland halting checks required under the Brexit deal. Ms Truss said it would be up to the Northern Ireland Executive to decide if the officials in the province should stop inspections on goods if ordered to do so by the DUP Agriculture Minister Edwin Poots. Well, I'm delighted to say that I've been joined now by DUP MP Gavin Robinson. Gavin, we've heard what Liz Truss has to say yesterday in relation to the checks. Do you believe that the Agriculture Minister will stop those checks very soon?
I think it's very clear from the official advice that he has had that it would be inappropriate to continue. In fact, he would have no legal basis to allow the checks to continue without the imprimatur or the agreement of the Northern Ireland Executive. He sought permission from the Northern Ireland Executive yesterday, and for political reasons, Sinn Féin refused to allow that paper on the agenda. So there is no legal basis for the checks to continue. He is well within his rights, and indeed he should take this step to stop the checks at our ports in Northern Ireland, because there is no legal underpinning for them to take place at all.
Well, you will know that Sinn Féin argues that there's already been a position adopted by the Northern Ireland Executive, and that is that the checks that are currently there should continue. I presume that you would reject that assessment that they have made.
Well, there was legal advice that tilted toward that impression a year ago, but it is now very clear, following a number of judgments within our High Court, that interpretation, that approach from the Executive is wrong. The legal advice, this was born out of the pre-action protocol letter for potential judicial review. And it is clear that the Minister has legal advice to say that he is on shaky ground. Of course, you know that politically we do not support the protocol. We oppose the protocol. We have stood in its way. And now this avenue is open to us, which indicates very clearly that without the support of the Northern Ireland Executive, where the Northern Ireland Executive takes the decision that these checks, which are a barrier to trade within our own country, which are frustrating our economy, which are damaging the lives of consumers, damaging businesses that operate within our country of the United Kingdom, that without that agreement within the Executive, they should stop. So the Agriculture Minister, Edwin Poots, is well within his right now, and I think he should take that step. Once he has firm legal basis for doing so, which I believe he has, he can order a stop to these checks which are harming society in Northern Ireland.
Well, Gavin, we heard earlier on the programme a little clip from the House of Commons earlier this week where the Prime Minister described the implications of the protocol and the way in which the EU was putting them into practice as quote-unquote insane. And he then went on to say, and I'm quoting now, he never thought when he negotiated that it would mean 200 businesses would stop supplying Northern Ireland, foods being blocked and Christmas cards being surcharged. But of course, he did know that at the time, didn't he?
Well, he did know it because, Arlene, you told him, and I told him, and we all outlined the difficulties that were going to come for Northern Ireland business. This fanciful view that having secured such a fillip in the protocol, the European Union would then turn around and say, well, you've agreed it, but we're not really interested. We never bought that. Others foolishly did. I think all political parties to varying degrees now within Northern Ireland recognise that this is impacting business, costing the tune of £1 billion per year. And this is as good as it gets. It can only get worse. The Northern Ireland Protocol, at the moment, we're living through grace periods where most of the checks aren't being adhered to, where they're not required, and yet it's still costing £1 billion a year. They said there'd be no diversion of trade, yet in the run-up to Christmas, Marks and Spencer's withdrew hundreds of their product lines. A UK company unable to sell their products within the UK. It's outrageous. It shouldn't happen. There's a democratic deficit. There's a constitutional imposition from the Northern Ireland Protocol. All of this is paramount for us and paramount for the Union in securing an outcome where we remain as and get back to the place where we are a full and integral part of our United Kingdom.
And of course, if it is insane, to use the Prime Minister's word, there is a solution to all of this, Gavin, is there? There is a solution, and that solution is to trigger Article 16. Why are the government so reticent to use part of the actual protocol itself, which was put in there for this very purpose?
That's right. So people criticise the use of Article 16. They say that you can't undermine the protocol. This is a part of the protocol. The protocol said there shouldn't be a diversion of trade. There has been. There shouldn't be a disproportionate impact or breakdown in the economy or environment or society within Northern Ireland. There has been, and I say that sadly. It was predicted. It has come to pass. And in July, the government said that the tests for Article 16 had been met. So they should have proceeded long ago. They created the impression that they were going to trigger Article 16 back in October of last year, around the time of the Conservative conference. They got cold feet. And all the while, they're allowing a foreign entity to control our affairs, a foreign entity in which we have no say to pass laws which won't impact the rest of the United Kingdom, but will impact in Northern Ireland. If the entirety of our political representatives in Northern Ireland voted against a change in EU law that was going to apply to us, it wouldn't matter one bit. The EU law would apply in Northern Ireland, and that's where we can say, as we stand today, it is bad, but it can only get much worse unless the government do secure the right changes. And that needs to touch on the proportionality piece, to say that, sending toilet roll from Scotland to Northern Ireland is not going to impact on the single market of the European Union. Sending a tree, Platinum Jubilee tree, from the rest of the GB to Northern Ireland isn't going to cross the border. Trees don't walk across the border themselves unless it's an episode of Lord of the Rings. So they need to get real and understand that what we have at the moment is hugely disproportionate and it's damaging our society in Northern Ireland.
Well, it's that old British soil coming across, isn't it, Gavin? That's the problem, apparently. But we will wait and see what the DUP does over the weekend, and we look forward to hearing if the government indeed is going to act, as of course they have promised they would for some time now. Thank you for joining me, Gavin Robinson from East Belfast. So the US President Joe Biden has warned that there is a distinct possibility Russia will invade the Ukraine next month. Russia, meanwhile, says it sees little ground for optimism in resolving the crisis after the US rejected Russia's main demands. The build-up of tens of thousands of Russian troops on Ukraine's border in recent weeks has stoked fears of an invasion. Russia denies it is planning an attack. And so with tensions between Russia and the West at breaking point, what role will NATO play in this? Now, to discuss this, I am joined by former senior British military advisor, General Chip Chapman, and Associate Fellow at Chatham House, Samantha de Brendan. Thank you so much for both joining me. Chip, if I can come to you first, I noticed that the Ukraine President has put out a statement this afternoon saying that media outside of the Ukraine are spreading panic. Is that a change in tone from the Ukrainian President?
Probably. You do need a united alliance to deal with these things, but the indicators and warnings at the moment would tell you that this is not necessarily inevitable. As the historian of my youth used to say, A.J.P. Taylor, nothing is inevitable until it happens. And one of the problems we've got is that Russia has never really joined the concert of Europe, and we have an imbalance and asymmetry of power here when you look at Russia versus Ukraine, but a balance of power when you look at Russia versus NATO. It seems to me that NATO is stepping up to the plate in the sense that you can have both indicators of de-escalation and an intent to show that you are realistic about deterrence for the future. So on the left of ARC, you've got the German position, and that's fine at the moment. And on the right of ARC, you've got the UK and US position. But Germany and those who are more reticent will step up to the plate, I think, when the ambiguity of grey zone operations goes away should there be an invasion. And we really saw that with the Four Powers statement, which followed the Skripal attack in 2018 when Berlin, Paris, Washington and London gave a very, very strong statement together about Russian action because it was compelling evidence.
Yeah, and Samantha, we talk a lot about NATO and have been talking a lot about NATO over this past couple of weeks. And sometimes I feel we don't explain to our viewers what NATO actually is about and how it came about. Can you give a very brief explainer perhaps to our viewers as to why NATO is there and why indeed Russia has come to the conclusion that they don't want Ukraine to join NATO.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm happy for the opportunity to explain this, because there are a lot of misunderstandings. So NATO was created in 1949 as a defensive alliance. It was created after the end of the Second World War and after the Soviet Union had occupied large parts of Eastern Europe and stayed there after the defeat of Nazi Germany. And the remaining West European countries who were on this new front line felt that they needed protection against further Russian advances into Europe. And that is what created the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And one of the most important, the cornerstones of NATO is Article 5, which says that an attack against one is an attack against all, and it is a mutual defense obligation. Now, when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, and very soon after that, the Warsaw Pact collapsed. The Warsaw Pact was the collective security organization that was aligned to Moscow during the Cold War. A number of former countries of the Warsaw Pact and 3 former Soviet republics, the 3 Baltic republics of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, slowly began to make it known that they would be interested in joining NATO. Now, I was actually working at NATO headquarters at the time. I was what is called a political officer in the East European Partnership section. So I was one of the people who was looking at all these demands from former Soviet republics and East European countries who were thinking they would like to join NATO. Now, there's a big myth that is being peddled by Russia in particular that says that NATO promised never to expand eastward. That was never happened. Even Gorbachev himself acknowledges that that promise was never made. There were discussions, and there was a statement by James Baker, who was the US Foreign Secretary at the time, that NATO would not position nuclear weapons in the former East Germany. But there was never a promise not to enlarge. But what is important to understand about NATO enlargement is that we're not talking about NATO going eastwards and saying to countries, we want you to join us. We have countries who are knocking at NATO's door and saying, we want to join NATO. And when that happens, NATO has to study each individual country, see whether they are democracies, to see whether their armed forces are under what is called civilian control. And one very important criteria is that these countries must not have any territorial dispute. Now, Ukraine has been making noises about wanting to join NATO for quite a long time, for about 20 years. And NATO has been in a bit of a conundrum. What do we do about Ukraine? Because there is also an understanding within NATO that Ukraine is a bit different because of the emotional ties between Russia and Ukraine. And emotions are really important to understand here. However, NATO also recognizes that any country has the right to determine its own security arrangements. That's actually an OSCE principle. Yeah. And Ukraine has actually said, on a number of occasions, we don't feel safe. We do feel threatened by our big neighbor. We would like to entertain the idea of one day joining. And in 2008...
I'm running up against time, unfortunately. I just wanted to bring Chip back in very quickly. He mentioned AGP Taylor, one of my favourite historians as well. Just briefly, Chip, if you could comment on the fact that Russia has said today that there's little ground for optimism. What do you think that tells us about where we are?
I don't think it tells you too much at the moment. That's leverage for diplomacy to carry on for the future. I think in terms of probability yardsticks and how you look at this in an intelligence sense, at the moment there's a realistic probability of conflict, which in intelligence terms is 40 or 50%. But I think Lavrov's language today was more conciliatory than it's been in the last week.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, both of you, for joining me. I wish we had more time to discuss this huge issue, but no doubt we'll continue discussing it on GB News over the weekend. Well, everybody, you've been watching The Briefing this afternoon with me, Arlene Foster. The show is back every Friday from 3 p.m. Up next is Nana Akua.
Hello, we've got some lively weather as we head in towards this weekend. A change from drier weather to much windier and some wetter weather to come as well, although southern areas generally staying quieter. Now, high pressure hanging on towards the south, but it's this area of low pressure which has been named Storm Malik by the Danish Met Service due to some severe weather here. That's going to affect parts of Scotland through Saturday, and then yet another system starts pushing in on Sunday. But through this evening, it's largely dry, a lot of cloud around across many areas, and it's mild as as well. But we will have some wet weather starting to push its way in across Scotland. The winds begin to pick up here by the end of the night. So into the start of Saturday, we could see some pretty wet and windy conditions across the West Highlands. But if anything, temperatures rising somewhat through the night with all that cloud around. So through the morning then, we've got this heavy rain from this cold front and some very gusty winds transferring from west across to the east through the day. We could see gusts of 70 to perhaps 80 miles an hour. These are damaging gusts for many places. The winds remain strong through the afternoon, but skies will clear. We'll see blustery showers feeding their way through. It does stay grey and misty across southern areas, but very mild here, feeling cooler where the